Hello, everyone. Welcome back to day 2 of the Reimagining Scientific Conferences e-Symposium. Our first session today is on technologies, tools, and platforms to facilitate virtual conferencing. Today, we will hear from leading innovators in digital platform technologies about current and future capabilities to connect scientists around the globe and beyond. They will showcase their latest technologies and how platforms are designed to optimize connections and collaborations to better recapitulate in-person interactions and outcomes. I'd also like to encourage everyone to participate in the interactive features of this event, including the discussion forums and gamification challenges, which can be found on the main menu on the left side of the event space. Please share your thoughts and experiences with the community and feel free to start your own discussion forum topic. Now I'd like to welcome our speakers. As a reminder, you can submit your questions for our speakers at any time into the Q&A tab and vote on other questions you'd like to hear answered. Please specify if your question is for a specific speaker, as we will be doing a group Q&A after the next 4 presentations. And our first presentation today is Bob Vaez, the co-founder and CEO of EventMobi, our sponsor and platform for this event.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me today. Thank you, Shannon, and everyone at Keystone, and everybody that actually is participating for this amazing event. It's just breathtaking to see so many event planners don't want to give up the learnings we've had over the past 2 years and want to take advantage of the impact of hybrid events and virtual events in terms of reducing impact on climate, increasing diversity and accessibility by attendees and speakers. So as a tech provider, I'm really happy to see so many passionate people around this, and not everybody is immediately trying to go back in person, even though that is kind of the beginning of EventMobi. So we started as an event app, and before pandemic, we were probably one of the top 3 sort of providers globally for in-person events. So I want to go through this journey and share a story with you, and also talk about how we approach event technology design and how we work with our customers. Hopefully some of the tips and the stories I share today resonate with you, and some insight kind of takes its way back to your day-to-day work. But probably the best way, and this is how I used to start my presentations at the beginning of the pandemic. It was a joke to shed light on the challenge we had all of a sudden transitioning into an online environment. It went like this. It went a planner and an attendee and a speaker and a sponsor walk into a bar at a hybrid event. The attendee orders a new login because they can't, they forgot their password. The speaker is on mute. No one can hear him. The sponsor orders a new, more traffic to the virtual booth because no one's there. And the planner's not even at the event because they got the time zone wrong. So obviously we fixed all these problems, but in a way our challenges are very different today than it was at the beginning of the pandemic. It's really about inability to forecast attendance. Some of the sessions I listened to yesterday, it was very clear that is, and even the poll results was showing that even for people that are attending here, it's a wide distribution. And I think as the economy changes and our situation changes, it even adds more complexity. Rising cost, lack of staff that have experience running these types of events is a challenge. I know we work with quite a few associations and nonprofits. About half of our business is actually on that side of the business. And one of the biggest challenges is actually keeping their staff. While all this stuff is happening, you have to deal with more technology. You're tasked with running more events because people say, "Oh, it's a webinar." Well, the webinars are not like what it used to be 3 years ago. They're a lot. They take a lot more to design and implement, and at the same time, lead times have shortened. So these are the challenges that our customers are facing today. And as a tech company, we have to innovate and keep up and address some of these challenges. So in 2020, we took our event app, and we knew we have an amazing platform, very engaging, very flexible to create different experiences. What we really needed was ability to help our customers sort of embed live broadcast, interactive breakout rooms, sort of one-on-one video chat, so we could actually continue these conversations online. Now, the world has changed, and we have to reimagine the way we approach technology, event technology design to address some of these challenges for you guys. And we use a particular philosophy, both in terms of the experience that we believe attendees are expecting today, as well as the experience that the event planners are going through, as it has changed quite a bit. So on the attendee side, it goes without saying, it's in person, it's a physical experience. We move into a grand space. We use all our senses. In an online environment, we have our keyboard, mouse, and screen that we have to use. And the way we have to think about the design of these experiences online is adding sort of studios, production, so we can kind of grab attention for attendees. Time is a big difference. Being able to allow attendees the option to consume content on their own time is critical, whereas everything for in-person event happens in real time. There is a huge difference in terms of commitment attendees make. Yesterday at the last networking session, we were talking about this, and it's very apparent that when you attend an in-person event, there's a major financial and time commitment, so you are invested a lot more than if you just signed up 30 minutes before a webinar begins. But at the same time, there are advantages that I think from a technology point of view, we can leverage. We can run marketing all the way till the event starts, but that requires really seamless integration between the marketing engine for your event and the experience and the way the ticket processing kind of works so that they can kind of log in seamlessly. Their engagement experiences are different for remote audiences and in-person audiences. And, talking about sponsorship, you probably have experienced this quite a bit. In-person sponsorship is about visual brand marketing that leads into deep conversation and sometimes decision-making at the event. That's not really how online events work, and trying to replicate that is a bit challenging. These programs have to be part of the program. So building tools from a technology point of view to enable event planners to embed sort of sponsors into their content and then identify those attendees that are interested to enable the sponsor to have conversation post-event is critical, and is a very different strategy in a way for online events. So that's just half the battle. That's really what attendees really go through on a day-to-day basis. And I think if we are trying to drive a higher adoption of virtual events and hybrid events, and really, especially with this group here, the focus is on sort of encouraging attendees to participate remotely so we can reduce the number of events that they have to travel to. We really have to pay attention to these, both in terms of the technology use as well as the event design. But the other half of the battle is what you all go through on the other end as event planners. So we had to relook at the way the event life cycle happens. And over the next year, we're actually dabbling into a few features to enable you to bring in, hopefully, your Excel sheets into a platform and your team into one cohesive place to have clear event design, communicate your timeline, your budgets, staffing. And I know with most event teams now distributed, this collaborative environment is a really critical part of the event to make sure it's successful. Again, I talked about event marketing. That has been a solution that EventMobi has offered over the past decade or so. We are working on that to enable a seamless integration between the way ticket types work and the way experiences happen on a hybrid in a hybrid environment. So lots of sort of innovation that's coming in the next year or so. We've always been really strong in terms of helping you manage content, but this is now becoming even more difficult. Pre-recording sessions for virtual events are new, whereas before you just had to collect abstracts, for example. So there's a lot of development that we hope to release in the coming year. But the focus is really enabling you to simplify and automate as much as possible of the content management here, as well as the design of your event space, your virtual space, your event app, the live sort of engagement experiences. And then the event happens. The event happens, and the tools that we have had to evolve, both for in-person planners, as well as the ones that are managing virtual environment. You have the live stream and the breakout sessions happening while your team also needs to manage session check-in for people that are on site. Your digital signage might have opportunities to connect your audiences, both remote and in person. Polls and gamifications, again, this used to be only for people that are attending the event. Then it was only for people that are virtual. And then now we have an opportunity to create shared experiences. Same thing goes for your sponsors. Lead capture now can happen online on the virtual booth and with their staff that are on site. So how do we kind of combine these experiences so everybody benefits during the event? Dashboard design is a major sort of focus for EventMobi for 2023. We've been really strong in terms of analytics, really deep analytics, but sometimes it's just too much data is not good data. So there's a lot of it available now, and we hope to make it a lot easier and actually take it a level higher. So what we are hoping to do is to bring this level of analytics at your organization level so you can actually have portfolio level analytics. And I think that's really helpful to be able to take advantage of the change that's happening within a lot of societies and associations, which is turning their sort of what used to be event apps, then became virtual platforms, into a year-round community because you can run your webinars and you can actually provide access to in-person chapter meetings as well as your annual conference all in one place. So it sounds really easy to do, but we kind of realize there is a massive amount of shortage of staff within our customers, and there was an opportunity for us to help there. So we've actually developed a fairly significant number of different services, from live stream production that you're experiencing here today, to helping with on-site video integration if you're using an on-site video company, as well as everything in terms of managing breakout sessions, editing videos, recording content, managing your speakers. A lot of that has actually amplified with hybrid events, and we believe having the right level of services is as crucial as our technology. So you're looking at this slide deck now, and you're like, oh my God, this is what I do every day. And you can kind of have a feeling of how demanding it feels when you kind of put it all together. And I think from a technology point of view, there's a massive opportunity to simplify these, make teams a lot more efficient in a way that they communicate and they organize this content. So I have another maybe 6 or 7 minutes left. I decided not to do a demo of EventMobi because you're actually using EventMobi. I mean, this is an example of how Keystone is designing for an event like this, but it is very flexible and can change. Instead, I thought I'd talk about 2 topics that Shannon thought would be very beneficial. One, how do we drive meaningful, lasting sort of connections between attendees in a way that they're either within the different audiences we have or between remote and in person. And this is not a new question. We've thought about this, and we've actually thought about from a technology point of view to solve it. And there are 4 different technology elements you need, regardless of the tool that you use, to really accomplish this. But the secret sauce is really you and the way you design the experience to make that happen. So let me put this in a maybe in a different way. So the 4 different technology elements that you need is ability to have a live stream, which is almost, I think about it as the opening keynote. I am almost anonymous. My video is off. All I'm doing is consuming content. This is the best way to warm up your attendees into your community and get them comfortable. Then you take them into a breakout session where the video is on. Maybe they're not communicating or interacting as much, but now there is a smaller sort of group setting element. You can take that into the next level, and you can have workshops that's more collaborative. You have whiteboards and so on. Again, that allows people to have more interaction. But the key here is to try to build up this comfort level for your attendees. This is true for in-person events. Imagine if you just show up at an event and then the first thing they do is like, go have a chat with that guy over there at the corner. Well, that sometimes happens in a hallway conversation, but it's not really lasting and deep connection. Really what happens is when we have repetition. So we see the same person in a different session. We have different type of experiences. And over the days of the conference, or maybe even in some cases, next year you run into someone that you had a conversation. And that's really how these relationships blooms. And it's the same thing for online events. I think there's an opportunity to curate these experiences and not randomize it. And that really lies in the power of the event design. Now, the big question that always comes up is, how do I connect my in-person and remote audience? And I have a very controversial way of answering it, which is maybe you don't need to do that. And it really depends on your audience. We have customers that their online community would never attend their in-person events. And they have these tens of thousands of sort of people that are at the different maybe skill level, ability, or even the desire to want to participate for an in-person conference. But sometimes you have people at the same skill level that they just make a choice based on the requirements or ability at that moment to be able to attend a conference in person or virtual. So if it's completely separate, then you can make that decision. You can kind of focus on these experiences completely separately based on these audiences. And when you do need to create these shared experiences, you can use the time that they're live together or create a pre-event sort of experience or a post-event activity for them to kind of create these shared experiences. Now, these are, again, very different for each event, but it really lies in a way that event planners have been designing experiences. So less about technology, more about event design. But what is really powerful, I think, in a hybrid environment is that pre-pandemic, we usually, for a lot of scientific conferences, it was either biannual or annual. People attend to present, and you generally have once a year to be able to meet your colleagues. Now, being able to have these experiences throughout the year and create these micro experiences using an event community is really, really powerful. And I kind of think about this as breathing. Event communities are not online social platforms. They don't have to be on all the time. You can use your annual conference, your virtual events, your webinars, your in-person chapter meetings, all as a way to sort of breathe in and connect your audience, and then let them explore the platform and content and interact with other stakeholders on your platform between these events. So happy if anyone wants to connect with me and brainstorm, happy to do that. We also have Allison on our team here attending the event. We're happy to kind of share some of these experiences with you. So I thought the best way to kind of make this 20-minute count is start with a joke and end with a tip on how to save money. So I know this is front and center for a lot of our nonprofit customers and associations, and I've actually shared this with a few of you. So hopefully this is not repetitive. But the first thing I think for a lot of our customers that are in the nonprofit sector, they don't really understand the vendor's cost model, and I think that's the beginning sort of part of trying to negotiate and try to understand how you can get a better deal, or where is this technology going to go? Is it going to get more expensive or not? Now, if you're dealing with an AV company and your agency, their cost model is massively human driven. So as salaries are increasing, their cost is increasing. So there are different ways to negotiate with them. For a tech company like EventMobi, a huge cost for us. Our R&D cost is almost fixed, regardless of who we're supporting. The rest of it is sales and marketing. So when you're negotiating, retention and ability to keep you as a customer is front and center. So just maybe keep that in mind in a way that has impact. Now, the cost of live streaming and particularly hybrid events, the labor cost is increasing, but the technology cost is decreasing. The other thing to keep in mind is we're all saying we're all in one tools, from EventMobi to Zoom to small entrant sort of new startups in the market. Everyone is saying they're all in one. So I feel for everyone that is trying to make a decision how to decipher that. But in some situations, different companies have focused on different areas. So if you can actually compromise and maybe use the same vendor for multiple actions, I definitely recommend that. The other thing that's really powerful is teaming up with your other sister organizations or other nonprofits that you have a close relationship and increase your buying power. Software companies, because sales and marketing is a huge portion of it, they can actually offer a better deal if you have a bigger buying power. And the last 2 points here is obviously multi-year contract. And I know this is very difficult to even hear because who knows what's going to happen even in 2 months. But really, that's a big factor in terms of cost management for you and be able to negotiate. And definitely try to think about if your provider has professional services to augment your team so you don't have to hire too many people or you don't have to use agencies. As the way tech companies price professional services is really to sell the software, not really to generate a lot of revenue. So that's a great opportunity to see if they have that expertise to help you. And the last point here is if you have sponsors, look for a platform that allows you to maximize the sponsor opportunities and hopefully reduce the cost of these platforms. Again, thanks everybody for your time. It's great to be here, and thanks for your effort and your focus on this critical challenge for our industry. Shannon, I'll pass it on back to you with the rest of the program.
Great. Thanks so much, Bob, for those great tips at the end and the whole presentation. Really informative. Our next speaker is Adam Frisby, co-founder and chief product officer at Sine Entertainment, who will showcase their visionary platform.
You know what? That is the very stereotypical way to start something on an online event. Thank you very much for the welcome there. Yes, I'd love to talk a bit about Breakroom. So Breakroom is a little bit different to most online event platforms that you've seen so far. The platform itself is a virtual world, which is a 3D digital environment. Conferencing and events is just one of the capabilities of the platform, but I want to talk about that specifically because obviously that's what we're here to talk about today. So I want to start off with a bit of an introduction about what is virtual worlds, because I think that's an important stage setting point. Then we'll talk a bit about why virtual worlds are great for conferences and events and how we can bring back a lot of things that we lost in the last 2 years as we've transitioned conferences and digital events to online. And then finally, I'll talk a bit about Breakroom and how some of the features we've got can help solve some of those problems. So I'm going to kick off with what are virtual worlds. Virtual worlds are online spaces. They're not necessarily 3D, but they are online spaces where users can log in represented by a digital character, so an avatar that you can use to wander around the world. Acting through the avatar, obviously, you can perceive and interact with the world and the other participants in the world. Now, I realize this can even seem a little bit unusual, if not a bit more entertainment-focused than what you would typically see for professional events, but by bringing people through an avatar environment, we can unlock a lot of things that enable innate social behaviors. You'll find yourself very quickly acting the same way you would in a real-world event. Once we start talking a bit about spatial audio, we'll come into that. Not every virtual world is 3D. Ours is, but there are certainly simpler 2D platforms out there. And the final point I'll just make here is that obviously we hear a lot about things like virtual reality headgear and whatnot. That's not a necessity here. These environments can be accessed through whatever devices users have. So broadly speaking, what we're talking about here is online 3D environments. People can wander around, have discussions, attend speakers, but most importantly, it gives you a lot of networking potential. So with that out of the way, let's talk about why conferences and events and why use virtual worlds for them. So I'm going to give a bit of a brief apology to the presenters and organizers here, because I'm going to make some comments about online events that are probably not very flattering. So, why online conferences suck? Just listening to a presenter isn't actually a very valuable experience. Certainly, I'm trying to make this a valuable experience for the audience, but doing things live, you lose a lot of value. If you are just simply playing a video to a crowd of people simultaneously, you're losing out on the ability to have proper captions, translations, and you're also losing the ability for the audience to watch and consume the presentation at their own pace. If you're delivering a highly complex technical topic, it may even be better just to write it out. And a well-written article is certainly going to be more powerful than a video. Videos often bloat things out. It takes longer to get your message and point across, and people ramble on, as I just caught myself doing then. So if you've got pre-recorded events, then you've got the ability to edit judiciously. You've got the ability to structure content more effectively. So I'm making a very strong case that maybe you shouldn't be doing this stuff live. And online conferences and events pretty much focus around live delivery of speakers, when the reality is that we are actually subtracting value, not adding it. So why do we actually attend conferences and events? It's the audience. It's a really simple point, but it's not one that seems to get picked up by a lot of online conferencing platforms. You never go to a conference in order to watch the speakers. You go there to meet other attendees, to learn more about the industry, and to have those side conversations in the hallways that actually matter. Ironically, this is the feature that is the least well developed in most online conferencing platforms. It is almost impossible to pull someone aside and have a conversation with them in an online environment. Certainly the ability to network with the speakers and so forth afterwards is an extremely limited affair. Sometimes you can set up dedicated environments and events after the fact at smaller paces. But what we're missing is we're missing the ability to loiter out in the hallway, have a conversation, and flitter between a few different groups. So that obviously impacts on the satisfaction levels of the attendees and the audience attendance rates and so forth. We've seen a lot of statistics from some of our customers and from other people in the industry that shows that these sort of webinar-style conferences often only have a 20-minute session time. It's pretty dismal. My comparison, some of the virtual world stuff we're going to be talking about, we're talking about 6 to 10 times higher is what we actually typically see from our customer events. So I want to talk a little bit about what actually matters. So conferencing events platforms really should be focusing on these three things. The first is real-time feedback from the audience. The ability to actually read the room as a speaker is really valuable. Right now, I am talking to a picture of myself. I've got no ability to see if I'm losing the audience. I've got no ability to sort of track how interested people are in what I'm saying. That is a really important feature that we seem to be missing out on. The second really important thing is obviously the conversations between attendees. As I said, people don't come to attend the speakers. You can go and read a paper if someone's come out with something interesting. You don't actually need to physically attend the conference unless you want to actually hear a bit more, to be able to ask in-depth questions and have those conversations on the side. The third thing that actually matters as well, and this is really for the organizers, but it's what makes things possible, is obviously sponsorships and advertisement. As much as we don't necessarily like it, those things are what actually pay for half the conference or more. I've worked with people who actually are on the other side of the spectrum running conferences, and I can tell you sponsorships easily can add up to 75% of the costs of running an event. Yet the capabilities online for sponsors to participate in online events is pretty dismal. You've got yourself a logo in the corner, you might be able to put your name on it next to a session, and you could probably sponsor a few presentations. But ultimately, you're not getting the kinds of things that you want as a sponsor. People that sponsor real-world events, they always go for the booth, or almost always go for the booth, because it gives them the opportunity to have interactive conversations with the audience there and make those connections. So those three things, I think, are the things that we actually need to concentrate on as an industry, and making platforms that can do what we want them to do. So with that out of the way, and I'm tearing through here, so we will have a bit of time to do a proper comprehensive demo of the platform, I want to talk a bit about what is Breakroom. So Breakroom is something built on something called the Science-Based Platform, which is a general-purpose 3D digital environment. If you think about it, it's close to a web browser for 3D content that happens to have very robust multi-user features built in. So It's a 3D world. It is unusual in that the environment can be edited in real time. This means that, for example, if you're doing demos and someone asks you a question, well, what if we change something to a particular way? You can have a trainer or an instructor or someone giving a presentation actually modify the environment in real time in response to something. This could be useful, for example, with training simulations, safety simulations, all those kinds of things where you may want to actually throw a bit of chaos into the mix and mix things up in order to make your point more clearly. So the great thing is that the platform supports real-time 3D editing. We have a whole host of functions that allow you to manipulate the scene in real time, and all the attendees will see these things simultaneously. The tools are all built for user editing as well as the platform. We actually provide everything that's needed to edit the platform, the same tools that we have ourselves. And that means that if you do have someone who's got the capabilities of creating and manipulating 3D environments on your team, i.e. they've got some Unity experience or some Unreal experience or something like that, they'll be right at home. They can get to work and start working with the platform almost straight away. We also provide some much simpler tools, which I'll show you as well in a moment. You can bring 2D or 3D content into the world yourself. Now, this can be interesting. It opens up a whole host of opportunities for people who, for example, let's say you were talking about geography and you've got a particular physical location you want to bring in. Well, you can actually import the geography and the associated buildings and all that kind of stuff into the 3D environment, presuming you've got the time and skills to do so. It's pretty powerful from an editing perspective. The second really important point, this is actually something that deserves its own slide, is spatial audio. It seems kind of silly, but the idea of being able to hear only the people near your own avatar, plus obviously speakers and presenters, enables the ability to have side conversations. We started Breakroom as a product during the COVID pandemic, very early on, and one of the very first things we noticed about the first few conferences that ran on the platform was that people formed the same natural communication groups that they do at a real conference. We see the typical 5 to 10 people standing around, and we see groups and clusters of these across an event. And we see people flittering between the two. If the conversation is not interesting, they just walk on. So lots of people will sit, and if there's a speaker or someone else, we'll see lots of people hovering around them, looking to ask their questions and to network with the VIPs at the event. These kinds of things don't typically happen with conventional webinar software, and we think this is actually a really powerful showcase of the actual power of spatial audio. We also have, related to that, a number of ways that people can express reactions to the environment and the speaker without interrupting their conversation. Obviously, if we let anyone speak over the top of a speaker while they're presenting, that would be chaos. But we do provide a number of options to use your avatar, for example, to express interest in a speaker and a presenter. And we'll show a few of those things in a moment as well. Finally, we have incredibly powerful conference running features, which are designed to allow a conference organizer to organize the event the same way that they do in the real world, only everyone actually behaves when they push the button. We have the ability to move people around environments voluntarily and involuntarily, prompt people, and a whole host of crowd control tools that can provide a very easy and slick way of manipulating the event in action. This obviously comes, of course, with the usual pairings of high-quality voice support, as well as live video, screen sharing, webcam, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I will not be able to present the webcam stuff as my webcam's used by the current conference software, but I do have a colleague who will be providing some support and will be playing some videos and things in the platform in a moment. Finally, the last and most important point is accessibility. Accessibility matters, particularly as you get more and more complex and sophisticated environments like these fully 3D virtual worlds. The Breakroom software can run in a browser. Anyone can get in. You do not need a high-quality computer. Unlike most of our competitors, we actually have support cloud rendering, which means that no matter if someone's on a Chromebook or a computer that's 15 or 20 years old, they can still get in and have a high-quality, robust experience. We provide streaming close to users in most locations in the world. Finally, we also have a number of features specifically aimed at diversity requirements. We have, for example, a number of cultural headgear and so forth for avatars. We have the ability to have prosthetics as well as wheelchairs and all sorts of other diverse features that allow people to properly express themselves. In fact, our avatar system allows a very wide range of customization that really lets people make themselves home in the platform. Finally, we also do have a number of actual direct accessibility features, including, for example, high contrast interfaces, the ability to change and manipulate screen UI control sizes and so forth, that mean that you can guarantee that a very wide range of users will be able to actually access the platform and get into it. So with that in mind, and I'm going to very quickly give a demo. So we'll shift over to here, and so I am now in Breakroom in one of our Confluence templates regions. I've got my colleague Georgina here, who will be helping me with these test demos today. So very first out, I'm just going to do a quick interaction with her avatar. So if I just play a quick gesture, which can be done a number of ways, but let's do that one. So obviously that's a very simple social animation, but you can do this between numbers of avatars that allow you to express various emotions and greetings in a way that's a little bit more sophisticated than what you can see in other platforms. Obviously, we also have robust voice, so she can hear me when I'm close to her avatar, but if I move further away from her, then she won't be able to hear me as clearly, and that's what really enables these high-quality social interactions. As I said earlier, the world is in fact fully editable. I've got this little edit region button down here, and I can actually take this entire location and I can manipulate every bit and piece of the world in real time. So all these changes that I can make will be actually shown to all users who are logged into the platform. We can place new content into the scene very easily. So if you're familiar with sort of 3D editing tools, this can be really quite simple. So we've just placed that object there, away, and you can sort of see that's been added to the environment. All support for common 3D model formats and so forth can be handled inside the platform. Besides, obviously, all these sophisticated editing platforms, we have the ability to sort of import complex 3D models. So, for example, we've got photogrammetry scans. This particular thing is just a very simple 3D model import that's been added that can be used to highlight particular events. Individual small spaces for breakouts and sponsors can be created. E.g., you can sell these as booths. You can create and configure as many as you want for your sponsors. Inside there, you can create, again, you can duplicate objects within here, so you can create additional copies of things. So I'll just grab that bit there. Right thing selected, yes I do. Okay, so if I grab that, for example, I can create a second copy, put it up on a wall, and then allow someone else to configure that. This is a little bit more complex when you're trying to speak and do editing at the same time. But nonetheless, this allows sponsors and booth operators, as well as individual participants in the environment, to create and customize their own environments in real time to their own specifications. And that obviously is very powerful from a branding perspective on top of it. In addition, you can, for example, that is a web page right there. We have support for video panels, as well as things like this whiteboard here that can be used as part of your networking functions. So, finally, I'm going to go to very quickly some of the conference management tools. We have a quite sophisticated conference managing system for people who are running the event. One quick example here is that I can actually move everyone to an auditorium, for example, in real time. So I can push this button and everyone will get this message saying an event's about to be in the auditorium. If you actually don't trust the users, you can also force them. You can, for instance, select a particular group, so it's maybe that particular user, and you can hit teleport to that environment. So here are some videos that my colleague started there in the platform. So we have also live support for pre-recorded and live video systems that are quite smooth, including the ability to optionally use things like spatial audio in these if you want to. Finally, if, for example, you've got someone who doesn't know how to use the platform, you can also use these same tools to, for example, teleport someone onto the stage. So I took that particular user, I'm going to put them onto the speaker stand, teleport, give them a second. I actually push the button. Yeah. So now they're moved onto the speaker stand, for example. So if you've got someone who doesn't particularly know how to use the platform, it's very easy for a third party who's running the event to be actually able to manipulate these environments and answer those questions. We have support for integrations with a number of third-party things, including software such as Eventbrite for ticket management, and a host of other things, including a full API and scripting system for completely custom content. We have seen people build everything from simple to complex games. We have seen all sorts of things built inside the platform. which is sort of a testament to the power and customizability of it. On top of all of this, we have a number of other bits and pieces. So, for example, I can put Slido, which is one of our little integrations here. This is just simply a web page. We can embed that inside the actual environment itself. So you can use this, for example, asking questions. So you can put quizzes and all kinds of things in there, as you can see here. They can also be used for Q&A with events. Finally, we were talking about audience participation and feedback. Well, we have lots of buttons on the side. So, for example, we can do a clap where you can see your avatar focuses there. We can also do what we call 3D emojis, which are great when there's a huge crowd. As a speaker, you can, for example, see that the whole crowd is speaking by a volume of little pixelated emojis that appear in the environment in real time. So with that in mind, I'm going to jump very quickly back to my slides. So I'm just going to take off my screen share. My Q isn't timed up, which it has. And we do next slide. All right. So I want to talk very, very quickly in the small amount of time I have left is about a few things that are sort of hot topics in the event industry. Hybrid events, one of the things that we've been focusing on has been building good quality virtual events. Our experience is that hybrid events often split the audience and there's no good solution to that. And the simple reason for that is that people who are at the real world event rarely want to sit in front of a monitor to participate with people who are not part of that event. That can be a real problem. You can obviously always stream the environment into the online event, but trying to get participation between the two groups doesn't really work very well. The best strategies we've seen with our customers has been things like doing virtual-only networking sessions afterwards that allow the real participants and the virtual participants to be on the same footing, and looking at ways that you can try and get those two groups logged in simultaneously. That does seem to be the best strategy at the moment. I'm absolutely open, though, to observations from other people if they do have good solutions to this problem, because we've not seen any yet ourselves. Obviously, the most important thing we think is just focus on delivering a solid experience in both locations. If you are going to do a hybrid event, consider running both simultaneously with separate teams managing each, so that you don't try and stretch your resources too far on that particular topic. Finally, implementation sweet spot for us is about 50 to 500 person events. You can do bigger, you can do smaller, but those are the good ranges. We can put hundreds of users in an environment. The environment you're seeing right there was optimized for about 200 users, but we have in regions that are designed for 500 or more users, including much larger auditoriums and much bigger networking spaces. 2 to 3 month lead time on planning events is really optimal. I know that's quite long, but there is a heavy amount of customization that is available to people in this environment. We've had everything from tropical islands to the ruins at Mount Parnassus in Delphi. Those are just some of the locations that people run events on the platforms. We've got templates and things that can sort of help with that one. We do have online training for small events, and we also do have educational discounts available for people who are running those events. Finally, if you want to learn more about the platform, go to breakroom.net. Brilliant.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Adam. Our third speaker today is from a platform we've all become very familiar with over the course of the pandemic. Sami Ahmed is a senior product manager at Zoom, focusing on healthcare applications. He will share with us how Zoom is customizing its platform for biomedical users and interactions.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to this conference. I'm happy to be here talking about scientific conferences reimagined and going through various technology platforms on Zoom. And with this, we have a few things that we'll go over that might be forward-looking. So you might see plans for products, including development, as well as things that we announced as recently as last week in our own conference, annual conference that talks about products, features, and functionality. That is preliminary, and all future release dates are tentative and may be subject to change without notice. So with that, let's talk about what we are going to discuss today. I will take you through the Zoom platform and then focus on hybrid events I thought would be meaningful for today, and really talk about some foundational elements around privacy and security, and then give you a few examples of what happens after an event. How do we help transform life sciences through the capabilities that we offer during the event? So let's jump in a little bit about myself. I work on a product dedicated to the healthcare vertical as one of the four that we lead at Zoom. You can reach out to me to chat about building products, unified communications, and I come from a medical devices background. I've spent time on 3 different continents, and you can find me here on LinkedIn. With that, let's dive into the Zoom platform that you all have seen and heard and probably experienced on your own through the meetings product that we have had that really brought video to everyone, especially during the last few years when mobility was an issue and in-person events were really not happening. But Zoom is so much more than that. You have both synchronous events like we are doing right now, as well as asynchronous through team chat capabilities that we have. Then there's the plain old phone on your desk or in your office that Zoom also offers through the cloud. In addition to all of this, we have dedicated hardware devices that go into conference rooms, into patient rooms, into classrooms, depending on where you are, which are really optimized to meet that infrastructure needed within a room for a conference, and I'll talk more about that in relation to hybrid events later on. And then you have webinars and events that we are developing and using day to day for larger platform requirements such as these. And we recently launched the contact center, so think of that as a way to reach back when your customers want to contact you back. How can they be routed and appropriately serviced based on their needs, depending on where you want to go after the conference. So let's dive into some tools and platforms that we have. Zoom for You really brings teams together. It helps reimagine workspaces, whether they are at home or in the office. Yeah, it allows you to engage new audiences and ultimately delight your customers, all on the Zoom platform that you know and love. So Zoom is here for you. I'll take a few seconds here to talk about what this means. Right on the top, we have the Zoom One, which allows you access to all the tools that I just talked about, from webinars to phone, meetings, chat, and then we have hybrid tools like Whiteboard and the events platform. But there is more to it with the Zoom AI that empowers conversations behind the scenes, whether it is for conferences, whether it is for chatbots, whether it's for analysis during a call that you'd like to get after it ends, because just recordings don't really do the job. To enable all this with an ecosystem, we have Zoom for Developers that allow APIs and software development kits, a marketplace for you to publish your apps that allow your customers to access Zoom along with other capabilities that you might want to offer to them. Then comes Zoom Contact Center that allows multiple mediums to interact when reaching out. This means you can have chat, phone, or a video first approach. So directly from your website, you can go into the queuing capabilities that Contact Center offers to enable those interactions. And all this comes with Zoom Spaces, which has not only the conference room devices, but also capabilities built into them, like workspace reservation, digital signage that kind of completes your whole suite of tools that allow you to get your ideas across, to communicate, and get more done together. Let's now dive into the topic for today, which is hybrid events. And hybrid events are really the way that we are moving forward in today's world, where you had completely online before the pandemic, and during the pandemic it moved to online events, and now we see kind of a mixture of the two. And they provide a bounty of benefits, from sustainability to cost savings to extensive brand reach and higher attendee capacity. So what do hybrid events need? You need to create digital-centric elements. When virtual events are providing you their benefits, you would also like to see things that are more engaging and meaningful overall. And hearing and seeing presenters from both in person as well as online adds that variety and drives energy and engagement. And the future of events is hybrid, as I said earlier. This is easy to see because it allows you to create much more innovative ways of communicating with your attendees. You know that to stay competitive, you need to offer that experience that are unique and engaging. And much like many of our daily activities, they will feature more video components going forward. So too will traditionally in-person events. So let's see how this all pans out when you go through a conference. And one of the first things that we talk about is really focusing on the virtual audience, which means you want to put the virtual audience on the screen in the room. How do you do that? Well, with the room's devices that we have that have cameras on them, you're allowed to have the ability to not only have one view that covers everyone, that probably misses some people who are in the back versus those in the front. We have this capability called the smart gallery view that allows the virtual audience to be presented equally, and it helps remind the in-person attendees of the online audiences, because you're really trying to give equity between the two. Another thing that we would recommend is really create that digital centric element, which means that when you have a virtual MC, then you really are developing content that your primary host virtually gives representation to your virtual audience, and is a constant reminder that your event is hybrid. So we recently did this at an analyst event, and developing these digital centric elements allowed us to be more engaging and having a more meaningful event. What we did was having the primary host participate virtually, gave representation to a virtual audience, and it really allowed people to feel more engaged. And a pro tip that we have for you is to have someone in the room available to communicate with the MC throughout the event through something like chat. And another thing that the virtual MC can get benefit from is having a live camera feed from the room that allows them to engage with the in-person attendees and really make sure that you're not just looking at a slide or a video or a demo, but really seeing that interactive audience and can respond to that appropriately. For the virtual presenters and panelists, the convenience and ease of Zoom removes a lot of barriers for the presenters and panelists alike. This means that at any key moment of your event where there's a panel discussion with 3 Zoom customers all participating virtually, we are able to secure and create a memorable session without asking them to travel and sacrifice additional time. Let's see why the future events is hybrid and the hybrid reality that it represents. According to Bloomberg, a recent report said that almost 39% of workers would rather leave their job if they didn't offer a flexible work environment. And that number continues to climb, especially for millennials and Gen Z employees, to 49%. A similar sentiment is rippling across the events industry, where there is a demand for more flexibility and engaging experiences, which is now becoming standard. So according to Frost & Sullivan, the global webinars and events will eventually continue to boom in a hybrid work as hybrid work becomes mainstream, and recent analysis finds that the long-term sustainable and impact of hybrid work and adoption of digital channels are creating an unprecedented wave of virtual events. The global webinars and events market is projected to reach $4.5 billion by 2025, up from $1.5 in 2020. So you can see the huge, tremendous opportunity that you have. The incredible amount of innovation over the past 2 years, as you just saw with the past two presenters, has really been driving this growth. Event managers now have many more solutions that are easier to use, provide greater access, and come stocked with features for networking as well as advanced data reporting and analytics. Companies are also learning that virtual events require the same high quality production and content creation that was used to broadcast TV, for instance, and live events there, which are really engaging and memorable to us in order to have a comparable impact and return on investment. What this means is think about the last time you experienced a virtual event, and chances are the event had more of an impact on you. This is because humans are social creatures who crave interaction and engagement. So just like TV programs, which include a live audience, live events supply the content necessary to increase the engagement, while remote viewing audience continues to enjoy it and add to this advances in communication technology over the past 2 years that develop the tools that we need to create such experiences. So hybrid events are becoming more of an effective and profitable event strategy because they combine the intimacy and engagement of live events with the interactivity and flexibility and global reach of virtual events. This promising approach combines two of the powerful experiences that can complement one another. And there are tools that are available to enable this, and one of them is the Zoom whiteboard. So the Zoom whiteboard offers a single cloud-based solution that can be accessed regardless of location, device, or time zone, providing flexible and intuitive collaboration features that you need to succeed. So it's really easily shareable. It can be seamlessly shared within the meeting or outside of it, allowing you to collaborate both before and after the meeting. And you can add resources to it, flowcharts, diagrams, pictures, allowing you a digital space to really interact with everyone. Let's now go into the privacy and security part, which might be a boring and complex topic, but believe me, it is fundamental to your success. Reason being that unless you have these key security features enabled with encryption, compliance, and privacy, you will not get the participation that you need. And tailored encryption options are necessary. You can go for end-to-end encryption, as well as platforms that allow the capability for multiple encryption protocols to be available. It can be something as simple as an authenticated login. If you do not have single sign-on, then multi-factor authentication adds an extra layer of security, especially if your viewers are needing to share scientific confidential information. It'll give them that peace of mind. You can also enable open authorization processes, so enable logging in through Google or other IDs that might be available, like Apple. And making meeting passcodes mandatory allows you to control better who is accessing the tools and knowledge that you are providing in that event. HIPAA compliance coming from healthcare is especially useful and necessary for sharing when you have patient-related information, and as well as complying with regulations like GT-ISO, PCI. So all these attestations really help build that confidence. And prioritizing user privacy allows all the participants to make sure that the information that they're sharing is secure and safe and will not be misused, so that they don't start getting, spam after they finish this event. Now let's go into a use case of transforming life sciences through virtual events. And I wanted to point this out because once we do events and we enable them and we have a great experience, what happens after? Now, taking the example of virtual collaboration in life sciences, suppose a vaccine approach was discussed in one of your virtual conferences. How would that really transform into success later on? And some of the things that we have seen our customers do are things like decentralizing clinical trials, which means participants may be familiar with the burden of traveling to the study center, times many hours or even countries away, and temporarily having to relocate in order to participate in a trial. Well, with fully decentralized trials, you can now conduct those events through remote monitoring and other tools and communication with the patient, checking their progress and tracking adherence to trial protocols. When trial enrollment no longer involves the need to travel, it really opens up access and gives you a more diverse pool of participants regardless of location. And this allows really much more equity, much more complexity to actually take complex procedures to be conducted at the trial, because you're no longer bound by a physical location. Uh, Once the trial moves towards manufacturing, again, virtual access helps the team get prepared for availability of that vaccine. You can vastly cut down on costs because you time spent waiting for somebody to show up on site before manufacturing starts. Now, the manufacturing obviously has to be on site, but there are so many things that you can do before and after to make that vaccine available. You can avoid actually travel restrictions that have become the norm during the pandemic. So, pharma biotech companies are now using virtual inspections with regulatory agencies, and even if the inspection itself cannot be conducted over a platform like Zoom, global staff can still collaborate virtually to prepare for those inspections happening. And then finally, once you take that vaccine, that product to market, even your sales interactions fit from all the stuff that you have been doing from the virtual conference to the trial, and now taking it to patients and doctors. And what it allows us to do is have the face-to-face time, where time is really is a critical resource, and you get a few seconds with the doctor. So this allows us to enter a new era of virtual sales that our customers talk about, where you can have video sales calls that can sometimes be even more effective than a drop-in approach. We have studies that suggest that a virtual meeting through Zoom is almost twice as valuable as an in-person meeting, because it's a scheduled meeting. You have the doctor's undivided attention using your content and having a conversation that the doctors value, because they're giving you that scheduled time. It takes a much more efficient and valuable interaction between the reps and their doctors. So using this example, you can see, going from a conference, enabling it through a hybrid approach, then making sure that the benefits of the conference are realized in product development, and finally to product delivery. So let's take a quick look. Zoom is more than just meetings and events. Use all the tools available and make sure that you are ready for benefiting out of this hybrid approach. So back to you, Shannon.
Great, thank you, Sami. And last but not least, we have Dr. Dorit Donoviel, the Director of the Translational Research Institute for Space and Health and the National Space Biomedical Research Institute, both at the Center for Space Medicine at Baylor College of Medicine. She will share with us how digital platform tools and technology can be used to connect scientists remotely across space and time to facilitate collaborative advances. Her talk is titled Working Like Astronauts, Lessons Learned from a Virtual Space Health Institute.
Hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Dorit Donoviel, and I'm really grateful to the organizers for inviting me to talk to you about how we reimagine doing scientific conferences in this new world of ours where we're working virtually or remotely. Things have changed so much for us over the past few years, but I think we can really move ahead having some lessons learned from unusual places. The places that I'm going to tell you about today are, number one, outer space, and how, as a virtual innovation institute, we are innovating for how to keep humans connected and working and productive, even when they're very, very far away from everything that they know here on Earth. Those lessons learned have been applied in our virtual institute model, and I'm going to tell you about how we've been able to be successful, some things that were not so successful, and how we learn from those things. So let's talk about how we're working like astronauts and how, as a virtual institute, we can actually enable scientific collaborations to occur. So I have to first introduce you to the organization that I represent. I have the pleasure of leading a small but very lean group of individuals. When I say lean group, I mean a lean team of individuals. We are the Translational Research Institute for Space Health, or TRISH for short. And we are a consortium based at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas. But we have consortium partners Caltech in Pasadena, California, and MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And we have individuals in those institutions. Our job is to think about how to make sure that humans stay healthy and extremely productive wherever they explore space, whether it be in low Earth orbit, close to our planet, going on the moon, which is coming up with NASA's Artemis missions in the next couple of years, or in the next couple of decades, where we're going to be exploring further destinations such as Mars. So our mission is nothing short of relentlessly seeking and funding innovative solutions, psychological, technological, scientific, medical advances that are state-of-the-art that will enable any human to explore deep space safely. And I say deep space because the further that we get away from Earth, the challenges become more extreme. So we are partnered with the Human Research Program at NASA, and they are an intramural program that also funds some people externally in order to look at the different challenges to the human body and mind as you put these humans in an extreme environment. And they fund research at NASA, and they're making steady progress to reduce these risks to humans in space. They wanted an agile, innovative institute to take risks, to invest in things that may seem high risk in terms of the nature of the projects. So things that maybe give you a little bit of a queasy feeling, saying, I'm not sure that's going to work. But if it did work, it would make tremendous advances and help NASA keep humans healthy in that very challenging environment. So TRISH reduces risks by taking risks on very innovative science and technology. So what are the challenges of spaceflight? And we'll get to what this has to do with the Keystone Symposia and how to do scientific collaborations and conferences in a virtual environment. I'll start to the right and just give you a quick overview. Deep space radiation is really quite challenging. We can't shield for all of it, and it's going to affect every system in the body. So we have to keep humans resilient. The distance from Earth creates all kinds of challenges in terms of the further you get away from Earth, you can't have resupply, you can't have people abort missions, and so you have to be extremely autonomous and resilient, much like individuals working in their own homes and far away from their team members. The hostile enclosed environment, what do I mean by this? If your toilet breaks, if you have a leak of ammonia in your environment, if you're not able to reclaim all the water that you brought with you and recycle it, those are all challenges that we have to think about as we move further away from home. Again, being autonomous. The gravity fields present a problem. Our bodies have gotten used to having a normal gravitational field, and that is what's needed to keep all our organs of the body healthy. But as you remove gravity, you start to have challenges to your heart. You have problems with your bones, your muscles, the way your fluids are distributed in your brain and the rest of your body. And so we're solving for all those problems. And finally, and I think most relevant for this discussion, is the isolation. So the further we get away from Earth, the more communication lag we have. And that means that when we're actually on the Mars surface or orbiting the planet, we may have up to a 40-minute delay in communication back and forth. That means if you say, hey, Houston, we have a problem, it may take 20 minutes for that signal to get to mission control at Houston. And then they may respond to it, and then it would take another 20 minutes for you to hear it if you're on the Mars surface. And so having communication delay really creates a problem in the sense of the humans that are going to be exploring space having to communicate with the rest of the world. Much like the world that we live in today, when we have virtual meetings, we may have problems with internet connections. We may have delays in communication or video feeds. And so all those communication delays and challenges are not unlike what some of us are dealing with today as we move towards a more virtual platform for many of our collaborations. So when you think about humans sitting on the Mars surface, these are big, big problems. And so, as I mentioned before, they require innovations. And to have an innovative institute operating virtually and finding the best solutions in the world in order to fund them and bring them forward to the NASA program for them to consider really requires constant, effective, bidirectional communication. So what do I need? What do I mean by that? Because NASA is an applied program, the missions that they're going on, the risks, the needs are constantly changing, and our knowledge base about them is changing. And so as an Agile Innovation Institute, Trish, our organization, has to communicate the needs of of NASA to our research community to make sure that the solutions that we're sourcing from that community really fit the need exactly. Conversely, we need to take the innovations that we find and fund and communicate them in such a way to NASA so that NASA understands how to integrate those things. We need to connect the dots. We need to explain how something like synthetic biology that can deliver pharmaceuticals on demand or food nutrients on demand can fit a challenge or a need for NASA in keeping the humans healthy. So being able to do bidirectional communication is really important. So here's the challenge that we face as a virtual institute and some takeaways for this community in thinking about scientific communication. We fund 146 projects. Each of those is led by a team from all over the country. We fund 93 institutions, universities, companies, government labs, 27 states. We have a very lean staff, 14 people, and they're spread across 6 cities with 3 time zones. So we have to manage this giant, diverse portfolio and talk to each other and talk to NASA in this bidirectional manner. How the heck do we do that? Well, here are some of the challenges. As I mentioned before, our management team is geographically dispersed. We have a highly dispersed funded research community. Expertise is all over the place. We have radiation researchers, we have psychologists, we have people who are developing new medical technologies or trainings on how to perform medical procedures all over the place. So how do we also not only communicate among these different experts across different sectors, how do we also keep track of all the highly evolving fields of medicine, technology, and science? These are big challenges for any institutions, but particularly for a lean, small virtual institute that's working with a highly operational customer. So what are some of the lessons learned on how to be an effective science institute in a virtual world? I want to start by telling you a story. Back in 2017, I was a brand new director. The Institute started on October 1, 2016. So this was 6 or 7 months in. We normally put out solicitations and people respond with scientific proposals, and we have scientific merit review that's done by experts. We take all of those review outcomes and we bring them forward to our scientific advisory board. These are highly intelligent individuals that represent different fields, the best of the best in the nation, and they advise us on which of the proposals that are highly meritorious scientifically really are best to fund. We meet with them. We meet with them and present some of these proposals, and they give us advice. This is stipulated in our federal funding requirements. We were scheduled to meet on August 30th, 2017. Some of you may remember that in August, on the 27th in particular, Hurricane Harvey hit Houston. And what you see here is downtown Houston underwater. So we saw the storm coming. We told our board, we can't meet in Houston. We need to move virtually. And you know what? What we learned from that experience is that we can meet virtually successfully. We all got together virtually during that storm. And because of that positive experience, our scientific advisory board, our SAB, now meets mostly virtually. People really liked the way we did things, and it made it easier for them because they didn't have to travel. They didn't have to take a couple of days out of their lives. They were able to participate in a meaningful way. So what were some of the things that made this a possibility? One is the staff prepared the materials well in advance. We were highly organized in the way we presented the materials to the board. Our team members had to huddle together because some of us didn't have power or internet, but we made it work. And finally, and probably most importantly, is our scientific advisory board, much like any science community, had to be highly engaged and motivated. So how does one arrive at a community of scientists that's engaged and motivated? How do you keep these intelligent and super busy individuals prioritizing what you're doing and do it in a manner that's year-round? So some of the things that we've learned is that because virtual is now the norm, our very few in-person meetings, we've had 30% of our meetings have been in person over the last 6 years. They're very infrequent, but because they're infrequent, they're highly valuable. So we really think through about optimizing the experience through curating really good content. We make sure that the speakers are highly diverse, that they've all been vetted to be very good speakers. We hold to a strict schedule. We optimize discussions over long presentations. We really kind of force that so that people are engaged and not just sitting there, checking their cell phones. And really importantly for those in-person opportunities is to offer very unique play opportunities that are also relevant to the subject matter. So to give you some ideas, in Houston, we're lucky to have the Space Center Houston. So we offer them free access to the museum, some tours, some meetups with astronauts, or very recently, last April, we had the ISS virtual experience. So it was an immersive experience called the Infinite, and we offered them tickets to go see that. And so going through that with a couple of our board members who are astronauts was incredibly unique for these individuals. And so having those opportunities and curating them, being very thoughtful was really important. When we do have virtual meetings, we keep them very short. We know that people can't sit on the computer for a really long time. And you'll see that our meetings, everybody's on camera. People are not turning off. If they need to go, they let us know and then they immediately come back. The materials are always provided ahead of time so they can prepare. And we also tell them exactly what we need them to do. I need you to listen carefully to X, Y, and Z and make a decision on Z. So we clearly articulate what the expectations are. So if they need to walk away, they're still able to provide the feedback that we need ahead of time. So they know what they're missing and they're able to still contribute. Now, the other thing that we do is we make sure that year-round we connect our community members to each other. We know that the value add to them is not just the content, but the ability to network. So we help them recruit people to their teams if they have an open position. We disseminate their content if they're actually sponsoring a workshop. We connect the dots for them when they're actually collaborating with each other, but they may not know about it. We introduce them to investors and potential collaborators. And then we send them articles or news that are relevant to them. So that takes a while for us to get to know them and what interests them in order for us to give them highly curated content. This is networking 101. And then the other thing that we do is we make them feel very special. Our community gets heads up ahead of our press releases. So anytime we have an exciting news release or an exciting program that we are announcing to the world, our community gets a heads up first ahead of everybody else. The other thing that we do for people in our community, whether they be our advisory board members or our scientists, is we offer them opportunities to talk about their work or their role as our advisors. We offer them opportunities to talk to reporters that want to talk to us, and also author thought leadership pieces either with us or on their own. But we make those introductions. We offer both monthly newsletters as well as virtual community meetings with thoughtful expert conversations. Again, not talking heads, but a chance to engage with our experts with a Q&A and hear to people talking with each other about important topics. And we provide them with access to funding opportunities and new workshops and things that we announce within the community in our newsletter. So that's how we keep these folks engaged. And so to sum things up, I want you to think about humans wherever they are, whether they be in deep space or even in their own homes, trying to connect to others, to stay engaged and really continuing to do meaningful work. And that is a key term for our astronauts. These are highly motivated, highly intelligent individuals on that long duration mission to Mars. It may be up to 3 years where they have communication delays with Earth. We have to think about how to provide meaningful work for these individuals, but not only meaningful work, but human connections. In the absence of having immediate communication back with Earth, how do we keep people happy, productive, and feeling connected to each other? In order to learn more about some of the technologies that we're putting in place in order to enable that on a mission to Mars, you'll have to tune in to another lecture by me. That's a whole other topic. But I hope this helped you understand how our virtual institute thinks about the global problem and even in deep space, connecting humans to each other in order to continue to innovate and do important work. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dorit, and all of our panelists. Now we have about 45 minutes of panel discussion and audience Q&A. We've got a few audience questions, but please do continue to submit your questions for our panelists as we continue the conversation. To kick us off, I'd like to ask you all a kind of general question about what were the biggest challenges you faced in adapting to the new needs of the community during the pandemic and now moving forward after the pandemic, as people kind of are changing their perceptions of virtual interactions, virtual meetings, and their interests in engaging in those technologies. Maybe Bob, do you want to start? Oh, Dorit, yeah, go ahead.
I'll kick us off. One of the issues that we faced as a team is you had to be so purposeful in your communication that you ended up filling up your entire day with Zoom meetings, right? And so everybody got kind of fatigued being on the computer all the time. So, I think that we almost swung the other direction and being over communicating to the point where people said enough, but then there was still a need to communicate. And so a balance of, going on a chat, a group chat versus having those interactions on camera was sort of where we ended up. What is the perfect balance? And it really varies between organizations of, doing it via text messaging or the actual in real time discussion via video chat was sort of critical to arrive at the right sweet spot.
Yeah, I would echo that. We don't always want to be on camera live all the time, but and have a healthy mix of asynchronous tools and capabilities. That's why and use that online camera time judiciously. Record it, transform it, use clips within it, and then use that as a resource that that can be deployed later on, so that you get quality time when you're online, and you get your own me time when you're offline or asynchronous to interact, to engage through chat, through video clips, through whiteboarding, of tools and capabilities that need to be used together.
Great.
Yeah, I think there's a good case to be made that actually some of these tools are designed to be disruptive almost. Plenty of instant messages and things are obviously designed to pull your attention away, but if you've got things like large group chats and video calls, you're potentially wasting 30 plus people's time. It's very, very easy to have a call where you've just spent $6,000 or $10,000 in salary talking about nothing for 15 minutes. I think that one of the other things you need to do is get your staff used to the idea that you can just log off if you're not actually gaining anything out of the call and it's not a social faux pas. I think there's a lot of pressure to maintain that connection when you don't actually need to be there.
That's a really good point, Adam. But maybe one other thing I wanted to kind of mention that I might have hinted during my presentation is this concept of separate audiences. Before the pandemic, when you think about conferences, everybody is experiencing the same thing in the same place at the same time. Then the pandemic happened, then everybody started experiencing the same thing almost at the same time virtually. But in the case of hybrid, what we were trying to do, and the immediate reaction of most of our customers, is exactly an event that we're having today, which is, well, this is not hybrid, this is fully virtual, but let me run a live in-person event and live stream the same experience so that people that are not there are able to experience. Well, I kind of challenge that assumption in a sense that, well, that may not be the best experience to consume that content and interact virtually. So and I think that takes some time to be able to build this skill set and experiment to be able to get there. But there is a case to be made that I don't think our industry has figured out, is how to run effective asynchronous hybrid meetings. Meaning you run your in-person meetings for your live audience, and then you run a separate meeting for your virtual audience, and you try to maybe even pre-record some of the live content basically pre-event, but made for the virtual audience, instead of just trying to record the in-person event with a camera in the back and then basically just adding the recording, on-demand recording. So there's a little bit of a different thinking. And in some cases, in terms of resource management, I think for a lot of our customers, might be easier to have one team to focus 1 week on the in-person events, and maybe the next week even, ideally you want it to be maybe not more than a few days apart, but even next week running that event for your remote audience. I'm passionate about this sort of concept of separating audiences and not creating an experience that basically feeds into the lowest common denominator experience. Bringing virtual audiences and then trying to put them in a box in a room where the audio is not good. Well, if I've spent all that money and time to go to a conference to meet people in person, why are you putting me in front of a screen to look at someone that's sitting remotely? I just don't think that's the experience that really feeds into the best level of engagement. By separating them, I think we have a better chance of creating the right experiences for the right audience. And I know a lot of people are I can't see the chat, but I'm sure a lot of you disagree with this.
It is interesting, and I did want to explore this. Oh, sorry. I did want to explore this idea of asynchronous events and how to design those, maybe who's involved in which pieces of the asynchronous events, what the timing should be to optimize interactions within groups or even between groups, and how that can be utilized for hybrid events. So Adam, go ahead. You wanted to add something.
Well, actually, if we are talking about this asynchronous versus synchronous, I think that the interpretation I have of these online events, and I talked about that before during my presentation, is that conferences are all about the attendees. It's all about the audience. It's not about the speakers. It's not about the content. And I think that if you frame it in the way you're thinking that the speaker is the most important thing at the conference, you're missing the point. Anyone can go on to YouTube or wherever and look up a talk by someone, and they will get a great experience watching that talk. when you've got a conference, what you're caring about is the audience. And I think that trying to build an asynchronous communication across audiences is probably not going to work, because you're not going to get that spontaneous development that you want. At that point, you might use some forum software or something if you really want to try and approach that particular problem. I think if we're talking events, we are talking live. And I think that we just need to structure them in a way that allows the audience to participate with the audience, because that's ultimately what matters.
Yeah, that is true, because I think that was the perception when we started all going virtual. If it's about the speakers, there's plenty of talks online. They're free. Like, why isn't a virtual meeting free? And so perhaps that's the key, is these interactions between the audience is what's offered in the meeting versus more of a, I'm just watching this YouTube talk and that's it. Sami, did you have something to add?
I really agree with Bob about creating an experience that's really with your audience in mind. So really keeping them almost separate, but maybe overlaid, where you do think about the experience of the user, like you were saying. Sorry, Sami, go ahead.
No, you're all on it. I think it really involves being empathetic and having tuned audiences for virtual first is always good, but having that live component in it and make it beyond a simple meeting. So what did you do before? What did you do during? What did you do after? And having sometimes the virtual audiences tend to have a much richer experience because of the capability to do that. But then there's always the serendipitous opportunities that you get while you're online. How can we replicate that, virtually? That is a factor. How can virtual audiences, engage more better? That's always tricky, and we tend to lean one way or the other depending on what the event is focused on.
And regarding the audience, when you're designing a conference for a smaller meeting, a smaller audience versus a larger audience, what considerations do you need to take into account regarding designing the programming or the interactive features, things like that maybe us as conferencing organizations haven't really been able to put our finger on?
So I really feel that talking at people is really not a good way to communicate. I've done it myself. I've spoken too long and I've talked at people, and the feedback I always get is that people learn more, engage more when there is more of a discussion. So keeping the remarks really short. Like, what's worked really well for us is that we kind of force our speakers to limit their remarks to 5 to 10 minutes, really hitting the high points, the main takeaways. And then all the technical detail can be provided later if people are interested, or there's material that's posted online, kind of like you see the supplementary information in scientific publications. And so it really helps the audience, the participants, walk away with some takeaways. They feel they've gotten something out of it, that they weren't just buried in the details. But also it helps people sort of engage, because there is the time to have a discussion. And so enabling platforms that have done Q&A really well are the ones that I think are most successful in engaging a virtual audience. So I think that's my big lessons learned.
Great. Bob, what about you? I'm sure you've worked with various organizations and designed various size events. What do you guys have to take into consideration on your end when it comes to customizing for that kind of size of event?
No, that's the way Dorit was explaining was right on. I think there's a big difference in terms of large events and small events in terms of the content. So there is, for example, a webinar or a single track event. There's not a lot to navigate through the through the event space or the virtual space or the event app, even if this was a seminar in person, it's fairly easy to know what the next talk is. You know what to pay attention to, and if the size of the event is also small, generally ends up being a more interactive opportunity, and you might want to use breakout session instead of live streaming, because that tends to have a better key for people wanting to participate and not just turn off their videos and do something else on the side. For larger events, I think there's a much more interesting opportunity to create different experiences with on-demand content, so people can go and pick and choose what they want to listen to or read, and maybe fast forward. Gamification, maybe they get bored and they want to answer some questions to get some points and prizes. Being able to choose a variety of different sessions, so that navigation of that experience becomes really important. And to some degree, I was talking about this, it really depends which session it is and which day of the event it is. I tend to like conferences that the first day is almost like live stream, and I just get a vibe of the event and what's really happening. And, I don't have to like turn on my camera because I don't really know anyone. But as soon as you kind of see the chat following through, you kind of get a feel of, oh, these people are cool. Like I'm in the same sort of space and I can participate. And then the next day, it's the workshops. I feel much more comfortable participating. So I think for those larger conferences, kind of splitting these type of experiences over time can be really powerful, rather than I've seen some conferences the first day, it's like it's a session and then all of a sudden I'm like a random meeting with a random person. I have no idea. It's very difficult to participate because I don't even know, what level this event is for me to be able to have. So it really depends on the event. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm now babbling on, but I wish we could ask the audience, because I'm sure the other side of the screen, there are people way more experienced than I. And it would be great to hear that. I think we have a session at the end of the day that's an interactive breakout room. So I'm excited to learn more from everyone that's listening to us today.
Yeah, that is interesting. Go ahead, Adam.
Yeah. I think that there's a big difference between very small events and everything bigger than that. So I think 20 people is about the breakout line. 0 to 20, you may as well put everyone in one room. It might get a little bit crowded at the higher end of that spectrum, but you can certainly have a discussion among a group of people with 20 videos on the screen. That's certainly doable. Past that point, you need to figure out ways you can actually divide the audience into groups that can associate with each other. So it's a question of how do you either provide the starting point that gives everyone the introduction and the comfort to actually step in and speak up. And ice breaking is a really difficult problem in this space. It's probably the biggest problem we've got with virtual events is the idea that no one wants to speak first. So you need to have one very extroverted person sitting at the center of every conversation that's going on simultaneously. And then you need to think about how can you structure that so that occurs naturally. Is it that you've got some kind of prompt? And that doesn't always work because not everyone wants to actually follow a prompt from something that's automated, particularly if the less human it is, the less likely people are to follow the instructions. But you need to figure out how can you actually structure people, whether that's, for instance, in our case with our environments, they are full 3D environments. You can put a sign up around a particular topic and expect people to congregate in that area, and they'll eventually strike up a conversation on that topic. You've got to think about those kinds of issues. But ultimately, going back to your question, I think there is that division. There's big and there's small. And for small events, it doesn't matter. The conversation will happen anyway when you've got 20 people in a room. It's bound to. It's when it's bigger that you've got to start thinking about crowd management and audience management and all those kinds of things. Because, again, it's all about the audience.
Mm-hmm. And Sami?
I think, I think technology can really be an enabler across the spectrum of these events. So small events, like we said, just simple in-event chat or just people talking with each other when it's convenient, and once you've done introductions or you're familiar with each other works. As the size grows, then you definitely need to be more tuned to making it a more democratic experience. So have chat enabled only with hosts instead of everybody to avoid spam. You would have Q&A sessions that allow upvotes. So you really get to see, okay, even though I think my question is the best, but really it is Bob's question that got the most upvotes, so that should be the one considered first. Having captions available at the bottom, so even if I'm not following, live, I can, or having audio problems, I can kind of look at that. Translation makes it even more equitable to, if I can read in Spanish while the conference is going on in English, maybe that's more meaningful to me. So different tools and tips, I think that allow you to scale between the two. Ease of use, simplicity, all those things make it much more meaningful and relevant. Large conferences obviously require event management services, but small and medium should not, and that helps make it easy for the organizers. All those things help, I think, make it more balanced, more participatory, and more inclusive.
Great. We actually have a related audience question, particularly for Ahmed, but Dr. Ahmed, if we have, the audience says, the Smart Gallery feature seems like a great tool for optimizing smaller group conversations like work meetings, where some participants are together in a room and others are remote. My question is whether this is scalable to larger hybrid meetings. So do you have any comments about that or thoughts about how you might scale that idea? And our other speakers might think about that as well.
So so what Smart Gallery does is, if 6 of us are sitting on a table, then you get normally like one camera in the middle that shows like a bowling lane of everyone, and that's not really very helpful. So Smart Gallery allows, without any additional technology, to pick up the video feed and focus on the faces to bring out them individually rather than all together, where you can't see the person farthest from. To take it further, yes, we are working on it. We've got, working with our technology partners on the hardware side to have multiple cameras in a room so that you don't depend on only one. So the size of your room grows beyond a dozen or half a dozen to 20, then you really need more than one camera, and then each camera has its own perspective that allows then to pick the right angle or perspective to capture. And even for me, if I'm sitting on my chair and then I get up and interact on a whiteboard, maybe the same camera that was focusing on me at the beginning is not the appropriate one. So the other camera helps bring the right perspective when I'm actually on a whiteboard, say a touch device, and kind of walking through that. So Smart Gallery type of features are really meant to break that barrier down between online and in-person attendees up to the extent possible. So it's not perfect, but it's definitely a step in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And maybe, like Adam had mentioned prior, you could adapt it to breakout groups or something.
Yeah, I think that there's a problem with hybrid smaller events in particular, in that you've got one group of participants who are innately disadvantaged, whether that's by latency or just the fact that you can't kind of tell the body language of the people in the room. And I think there's a fundamental problem here that if you've got someone in the room who's quite important, let's say the CEO of your company is sitting in the room, and you've got those people, that to some people can be perceived as a problem, not only just as a communication issue, but it's also, does that impact your career advancement, that you're dialing in remotely for these kinds of things? Those kinds of considerations need to be taken into account. And I honestly think the best solution to this one is to go all or nothing. I really do feel like that hybrid is a solution that is going to disadvantage one group over the other. And if you want to avoid that scenario and be democratic, you've got to lock to one or the other. That means either flying people out or you keep the number of remote attendees down to such a minimum that the person is big on the screen and is feels equal enough. Because if you've got 16 people on a Zoom call and 5 people in the room, there is a natural disconnect that forms between the two. And I think that needs to be considered and addressed, because I don't think this is a technological problem that can be solved by technology. I think this is purely a matter of logistics, and there's nothing you can do about it. So you may as well try and plan around it and avoid the problem in the first place.
Yeah, we have a hybrid team. I mean, it's a small team. It's not the problem of the large conference, but yeah, we did, especially in the very beginning of the pandemic when we started working so differently. They felt that there was FOMO, right? They always felt like they were out of the loop, and so it actually made the team dynamics worse, right? Because there were some individuals that were closer in proximity than others. We really struggled with that, and I think you're right, Adam. What we did to solve it is that we did bring them in occasionally so that they felt more integrated into the team. So there were like the personal connections between the team members were strengthened through those very infrequent in-person interactions, so that when they were away, they still felt connected emotionally to the team. But how you replicate that with strangers is a real problem.
Bob, anything to add from your perspective?
Yes, I mean, I've heard of this, but not a lot of our customers are using it. I'm kind of curious, especially on the medical side. I hear a lot of conferences adopting, in Europe in particular, a multi-hub approach. The doctors and the patients are actually in the hospital, and if they have to attend, they just get in a conference room and they attend. So then you end up having sort of 7, 8 sort of hubs to be able to participate together. I think that's really exciting. I think the technology is there to support it. I just don't know much about the success factor of that in terms of connecting people that are not in the same hub. Because if you're in the same hospital and you work with the people that you know, it's almost like coworkers. The tendency is to converge in that hub and not really participate with people outside. So I think that's a really interesting event design opportunity. It's been around for a while. There's actually books written about it pre-pandemic, and it would be interesting. I kind of see that as a really interesting model for hybrid, because you have smaller in-person teams, and they kind of come together as part of a bigger event. Maybe there is a bigger conference happening, somewhere else, but at least there is this notion that I'm not alone in my office by myself, sort of attending this event, and at least there are other people I can share that experience with.
Mm-hmm. One thing that we found really effective to do the icebreaker, particularly in the beginning when people were still getting used to being virtual, is to have them do problem solving together in a fun way. So one experience that we brought forward is we did like a scavenger hunt, a digital scavenger hunt, where there's actually companies that offer these services. They're like, you do a scavenger hunt through like a museum, a virtual digital museum, where you're looking for a particular artifact in a work of art or something like that, or you're going through a natural science museum virtually, and as a team you have like groups of people and you problem solve together. You have to solve questions or problems or riddles, and then you start to really kind of bond with people virtually. And so we found that incredibly effective to do sort of the team bonding virtually. And so maybe if you're trying to connect people with other people and you're strangers, maybe doing something like an icebreaker like that, an activity where it helps you really kind of problem solve together with somebody else across the world, may be really effective.
Adam, have you guys done any problem solving or scavenger hunt type things in your virtual worlds?
We have actually. I have to say that there's all sorts of ways that people can do this. Now, the virtual world part, I think, is actually optional. Yes, we've got a fantastic 3D platform that you can bring anything into, so that stuff, yes, fits in naturally. But even doing just conventional video conferencing platforms, we've had success with that too. We did our company team building last year online, which was a rather interesting experience. We didn't quite know how it would go down, but we had a troupe of actors who came in and role played this whole James Bond scenario with our whole company. And it was great. Having these people in there who could really read and control a room and get people into the mood of things, it translated. And I think that was a great experience at actually getting the whole company to have a bit of fun as a group online in a way that you wouldn't really think that would work. but it actually turns out it does. And obviously, then if you've got the 3D environments, you can add games and all kinds of stuff into that as well. So it's not just one or the other. But I think that it's all about bringing people together ultimately. And if you can do that, then there's lots of opportunities for each of these things to happen.
So what if you stuck into your virtual meeting a professional comic or a comedian that would sort of lighten the mood, or maybe pick up on some things that people are saying, and make it like more fun for people? I love the idea of actors. That's brilliant.
Yeah, no, it was brilliant. They were all out of work because of COVID, and came in and did our team building. It was fantastic. It was good for them. It was good for us. It worked, and I suspect they're probably still doing it, even now that the restrictions have all been lifted.
So we did that, Adam, at EventMobi, and our employees kicked them out because they thought our account was hacked. They didn't realize they were actors.
They knew something was off. That's great. We have another question from the audience for Adam. Could you bring a high resolution 3D, perhaps atomic scale model into one of the break room situations?
Absolutely.
Can the attendees and your people behind manipulate it to kind of explore the 3D model?
Yeah, no, our platform was built well before we started doing conferences and events, and we were built about a general purpose 3D content delivery platform. So that one of the side effects of having that ancestry means that we've got really robust tools for bringing in all kinds of content into platforms. We've had people bring in actual CAD models and all kinds of stuff to do live shows of particular things. Scientific data is not much of a stretch from there. That should be quite simple. If you can get it out into a standard 3D model format, you can get it back up into the platform pretty easily. And then if you feel handy with scripting languages, you could even write some interactivity on it that's specially customized, or you can record animations, include those in the 3D models, and that should survive the upload process. So yes, absolutely. And that's the kind of thing we love to see as well, as people actually looking at the platform saying, what are the actual capabilities of this platform beyond what other things offer, and how can we take advantage of that? Those kinds of customers are absolutely my favorite.
We had envisioned actually running our conferences in what we call the phygital world. So to create like a space-like or a spaceship environment and run our conferences inside of like a digitally created sort of 3D simulation of a space flight. So that was something that we actually kicked off, and unfortunately the company we work with never quite got it right. And so there was difficulty in audio and video synchronization. And so within this, what they call the phygital world, it never came to fruition on what my vision was. But I think I would love to take a look at some of your capabilities to see if we can make that come to life.
I'm going to butt in here and just interject, because I think there's actually another project that I worked on many, many years ago. So this was actually about 15 years ago that I worked on this project. We had a virtual world that would let you export the whole world, and NPCs, like non-player characters inside the world, could be included in that export. And I know that NASA actually was testing it out as a possible solution to the long communication delays on space flights. If you're out by Mars, then you could be 25 minutes video delay. So obviously real-time communication is out, but they were experimenting with the idea of actually taking entire 3D worlds loaded with content and characters and transmitting those instead as a way of providing sort of a bit of human touch that you couldn't do in real time anymore.
Interesting. What about our other platforms? Were there ways that you can do kind of interactive model exploration or even demonstration?
So one of the companies that we work with actually makes medical games for doctors. So it is it's a real engine, a simulation of a human body, right? And doctors can collaborate, even doing a procedure like maybe it's our arthroscopy or something like that, through remote participants working together, collaborating together on a medical procedure. And we need that for spaceflight for the reasons that Adam was talking about. We may not have the communication with Earth, and so we need to be self-sufficient. So I think it's critical to think about the applications beyond just entertainment, obviously, of collaboration tools, real collaboration tools. So you can envision even scientists working on a computer problem, or maybe they're working on a rendering of a protein model, or and being able to virtually collaborate in real time, moving maybe protein models around, or having that exchange, those capabilities, working in real time and digitally moving things, and sharing those kinds of experiences, like the medical gaming company that's doing that, I think is the future. We're definitely looking at those things for spaceflight.
Great.
Yeah, the Zoom whiteboard is kind of a tool like that, easy to use. It doesn't you don't have to learn CAD CAM design to interact with it. You can draw shapes, and we gave customers the ability to create templates. So my colleague might create a nice whiteboard, and I can then just pick that as template and deploy it to other places. Share it across the board, limitless canvas, so that you can continue working on one end while another team works on the other end, tagging each other, sharing with each other. Those capabilities help. We were talking about fatigue on video, so converting your video into an avatar is something that we are experimenting with, so that it helps not only be live, but don't have to worry about what I'm looking like that day or what I'm wearing that day. Or sometimes younger participants may not be comfortable sharing their live stream, and so there can be many approaches to this, and it has to be easy, intuitive, and interactive enough to be meaningful.
I mean, some of us are on camera all day long, it seems like, right? And so even taking a bio break, I when I turn off my camera, I feel like people would think that I'm not interested, I'm not engaged, or I'm away from my computer. But maybe I'm just eating, or maybe I just had to get up and go to the restroom, and I came back, and it's just it's people need an opportunity to take a break for a second without communicating that they're not interested. And so I like what you're saying, Sami. Is there a way to what would the avatar do? Is it just a picture? Would that avatar actually be doing something while you're off camera?
Yeah, actually, it's pretty cool. It can be an animated character, like an animal, or a human animated character that you can choose and customize. So I can be without hair and with glasses to suit my profile, and then when I speak, the mouth moves along with head gestures and eye blinking. So at least it is interactive in that sense, and it's not just a static image. And you can use it while turning off video. So I may have to walk across the room to pick up something, but I turn off video and I can still speak or hear, and the avatar will mimic as if I'm speaking right there without having my video on. Or like you said, if I'm taking a break, initially we started with just these little filters, like I can put a mask in front of me and then eat my sandwich or soup, but then we said that's not as helpful, so we're trying avatars now, see if that is more easy to use and still allows that interactive element.
Great. I wanted to touch on the idea of sponsors, and Bob brought up in the beginning of his presentation the joke that how do we get people to visit the sponsor booths virtually when in person, everyone's kind of drawn to find out what it's all about. Somehow, virtually that has not converted. So maybe we can all talk about ideas that engage audiences more with those sponsor booths or incentives. What ideas do people have to, because sponsors are a big part, a lot of funding for these platforms for nonprofits and government and various organizations that have to hold these meetings. Cost is an issue. So how do we get the sponsors to get out of the meeting what they need to?
I'm happy to pick that one up if that's good. So the crux of it is that sponsors really care about collecting leads. I mean, that's ultimately what you sponsor a conference for. You want to get leads. You want to get people you can talk to that you can then sell products to. That's broadly speaking it. In the real world, that's sold mostly through booths. Booths seem to be the de facto way that every conference runs, and that's how the sponsors get their value for money. Usually the bigger the booth, the more expensive it is, and so on and so forth. But it's ultimately about foot traffic. The problem you've got with online events is that for the most part, you are just getting yourself a branded element somewhere in the event. And that doesn't cut it, because for the same amount of money that they're spending to get that branded element, they could easily pay for some online advertising and probably get a far better return on investment. So you're competing against digital advertising when you're online. And the problem is that you don't have the high engagement value that you do with just an image or a logo or a shout out from a speaker. You actually need the ability to have your salespeople speak to the crowd. That's really what you're paying for at a conference, and that's what you want to see. And that's the great thing about online environments, particularly virtual worlds, is that you actually get the ability to do that, because you can make people literally walk through the sponsor arena before they get to an auditorium if you want to. You can go down that level. And that means that you've got the ability for the sponsor to have sales reps in that thing, and the ability to go up and approach someone and say, hey, are you interested in product X? And they get all the same benefits they get from the real world, and they don't have to travel people out there. They don't have to spend a whole bunch of money on overpriced conference booth equipment, i.e. if you want to rent a TV, it's $2,000. It's kind of cheaper to buy a new one than it is to rent from most of these places. So you get to take all of that out of the equation. And I know, having run conferences as well, it's not the conference organizer who gets that money, it's always the venue. So you can actually take a bigger cut as the organizers from the sponsors. They can get the same value, and I think you're actually cutting a whole bunch of middlemen out of the way in the same process. So it's sort of a win-win-win for everyone, except for the conference venues, of course. And I think that can actually be one of those areas where virtual world platforms like ours can deliver a lot of value to conference organizers.
Great.
I'm happy to kind of chime in. I mean, I did talk about it a bit, but I think there is an opportunity, but it's a shift in a way that we approach sponsorship for events. In majority of events, I mean, for pharma events, for example, you can't even have sponsors. There's regulations involved. But for other types of trade associations, for example, sponsorship is key. The way sponsorship was played, or is still played for in-person event, is huge branding. So yes, there's a huge element and focus on lead gen. But if 5,000 people, 10,000 people are attending a conference, having a big booth, having a big banner on the side, like these are branding elements as from an advertising point of view, and it's important. But really what ends up happening is that the sponsor is sending the best salespeople to go on site, to shake hand, and to be able to answer questions and so on. I think there's another opportunity with virtual event, and it may not require the salesperson, but the expert in that company that developed that product or is involved in the research to be part of the program. And I call it as an opportunity because it requires a different way of thinking for a lot of organizers, because naturally they don't tend to go to the vendor to get content. They go to the consultants, they go to the researchers, they go to universities. And I think there's an opportunity to make sponsors part of the program. What that ends up happening is you don't have to have virtual meetings at the event to bring value to the audience, just by providing, hey, these were the people that were interested in your session, or we ran a poll and this is what the response came back. Or actually it's an open sort of lead form. People that are interested says, follow up with me. So it's sort of a permission driven, almost like lead forms online that, hey, contact me, but I don't want to spend, the 3 hours I have in front of TV with a salesperson that I don't really know. And I don't know how, I mean, in a real environment, in a booth, if you don't like what that person is saying, you come up with an excuse, you look at your watch, it's like, nice to meet you, I got to go do something. You can't really do that virtually. I mean, it's really rude. Right now, I'm sure Shannon wants to stop me from talking, but like, it's really hard to kick me off the screen, right? So we have to kind of rethink the way, sponsorship is played to bring value to sponsors, but also to attendees, and think a little bit differently from a lead gen point of view. Maybe it's not making 1 hour meetings happen while the event happening. Maybe it's just providing a list of these are the people that opt in to want to be contacted, and then they can kind of take it post-event.
Great. I also wanted to come back to the idea of how to make these events more affordable to put on and ways to optimize engagement while minimizing the cost. And Bob had touched on some of this in his presentation, but maybe we could all expand on that and from the view of different platforms as well. For organizations that are nonprofit or just don't have as much funding, how do we engage with these tools, but in an affordable and sustainable way so that we can continue to offer these things for our audiences for years to come?
I mean,
I would say,
correct me if I'm wrong. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Sami.
I would say the fundamentals are ease of use and ability to scale. So you don't need, very specialized tools to do what you want, and really take the tools available all the way from small meetings to larger ones to huge events and multi-track, events that are happening all on the same platform, and the ability to complement it with tools within the platform. All those things help to make it sustainable with models that are available in the SaaS world, software as a service, subscription versus one-time purchase. Those elements help. Sorry, go ahead, Dorit.
Yeah, I mean, it's really key to understand that you have to really kind of do a combination of asynchronous communication and synchronous communication, right? You can't just give everybody this giant bolus or meal of dense material all at one time. And I think we're all limited in what we can take in, right? And so, you recognize that if you want to convey information or you want engagement with a sponsor, it's a combination of synchronous and asynchronous communication. So materials ahead of time, materials after, just the right amount, not bombarding, right? Because it's really a sweet spot. Like if you send out too much information, people just like tune out. So you really have to kind of learn what is a good balance. And then when you do convene for the synchronous communication, it's as short as possible and really engaging and entertaining and to the point. And so I think that's the key is not to cram too much into those synchronous virtual real-time events.
Adam, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'll finish off on just saying that the cost of an event isn't the technology. I mean, software is relatively speaking cheap. Yes, it can get pricey in certain cases, but broadly speaking, it's not the cost factor. A well-run event, though, is expensive because you've got people. A well-run event has someone organizing the program, wrangling the speakers, making sure that the content is compelling, along with all the on-the-day support where you've got people helping other people, or you've got people running discussion groups and all that kind of stuff. All of that stuff is the expense on a conference. And I think that there's probably two ways that you can save money. The first is obviously to cut back on that stuff, which is not a good idea. I think that's really the wrong approach. The second thing is to start reusing materials. I mean, building all this materials for something that is going to execute just once means that you've put a lot of work into something that you're never going to be able to use again. You need to think about, how can I change the nature of my conference? Do we actually have to have just one event a year? Could we do 12 events, one a month for a smaller audience? And then we can reuse lots of those materials. Yes, we're using a bit more time, but I think at the same time, you've got less prep time involved, less execution time, and there is an economies of scale from running these kinds of things. And even that can run across departments. You can have one group who, for instance, are running conferences for a whole group of different people who have got very familiar with the tools, the platforms, and the show routines that are needed to execute these things. And that's how you get your savings. And that's how you keep things going. Because really, a online conference should not cost more than running a real-world conference. Venue hire and things is expensive. You should be able to do these things for a fraction of the cost. The question is then more about how much do we have to invest in custom content for each of these things, and how much does that cost to produce? And then working out how you can reuse as much of that as possible.
And Bob, do you have anything to add?
I think it's a little bit more complicated. The profit margin for in-person events are higher especially for trade associations. There is an aspect of sponsorship that you can't really materialize to the same level for online events. But at the same time, I agree with Adam. There is a value perception for technology. I think when Apple came out, people had a hard time paying 99 cents to buy a game on their mobile device, but they would go out and spend $6 on a latte. That they could play the game for a month versus drink that latte in like 5 minutes. So there's a perception around the value of software. Pre-pandemic, I remember the data from PCMA was showing the spend on event apps and Wi-Fi technology was less than 2.5% or 3% of the total spend of an in-person conference. So you can kind of see like where we kind of started. Now virtual events happened. Well, all of a sudden, all that budget that was available kind of went into sort of virtual event companies, and they could charge a lot more. And their margins were really high, and a lot of companies made a lot of money. And then now there is basically a challenge by how much can I charge for my virtual event? And when you kind of look at that, the cost of a virtual event is also software. So software is, for especially smaller events, is a big portion of the cost. But the staffing is a bigger cost. And I think, at least from EventMobi's point of view, I think the biggest value that our customers can get when they start using EventMobi on a year-round basis. And they move away from single-use software purchase, which used to be very common within the event industry. So how do you kind of bring all your events under one umbrella and then basically use the same software over and over again? And that's how you get value. I think Zoom has an exact same model. I mean, they came in with this model into the industry, and that the adoption for events that are small, medium, and they can kind of run their own conference is a very effective pricing model, but not for conferences. I mean, we work with large, like Fortune 500 companies as well. Sometimes they like to pay more for buying separately because they can't get the company to agree on doing one purchase order for the company. So they keep buying individually for each event because each event has a different purchase order. I like to say that should not be the case for nonprofit associations. And I think there's an opportunity for a lot of nonprofits that are kind of work together, maybe to team up and actually use the same software for their organizations. And they have a better buying power with a lot of software companies. So that's one tip in terms of usage of software. The more you can use it, the bigger value you can get throughout the event. And sometimes you have to compromise. For example, EventMobi has webinar capability, not as good as Zoom. But if you're using EventMobi for an in-person event, can you use Zoom? Or it's the other way around too. So you're using Zoom every day for your corporate meetings. You really need to go and buy a different piece of software for that single user conference that you're running. So it's a decision that a lot of organizations have to make, to be like, maybe we don't need to have the best tool for every single thing we do. Maybe we need to compromise and then just use one tool to simplify the workflow.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, we're going to have to wrap up. It's the end of our session time here. Thank you all for these really insightful and informative discussions. I think we learned a lot here today. I'd like to remind our audience that all the sessions will be available on demand for free after the event, likely by the end of the week, so stay tuned for that. I'd also like to take a look at our poll results before we wrap up. So our first poll that we deployed, we see that generally people are pretty either mediocre or disappointed with the event. So we need to improve on the virtual conferences that we're putting out there. And number two, when organizing a virtual or hybrid meeting, the most important factor we consider is cost, interactive features, and technical support team are pretty evenly distributed, and there's other factors as well. And our third goal, have costs to provide hybrid conferencing options exceeded revenue generated by remote registrations, and it's evenly distributed across the board there. So I think it highly depends on the platform and the events, and so we'll see how that evolves going forward. All right, we'll now take a 1-hour break before reconvening to report on the outcomes and conclusions of the event at 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time. If you've been invited to participate in one of the breakout discussion groups, please report to your group meeting in about 15 minutes at 1:30 p.m. to discuss what we've learned over the past 2 days. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again shortly.